Hello everyone, myself Madhuri, Associate Professor, Department of Law, Padmavati University. Today we are going to discuss about another important structure from Contracts Act, that is consideration. Why you need consideration? Consideration is a promise when you are making a contract, performance or forbiddance bargaining by the particular promisor in exchange for the promise. This consideration is the main element of a contract. Without consideration by both the parties, a contract cannot be enforceable. If a person used money to purchase an apple or any kind of item, a merchant consideration has to be happen, and the money is the person's consideration. Consideration could be a promise, performance, or property with a legal value, but not the economic benefit is not required. A gift or a gracious promise cannot be called as a consideration for the have no bargaining. The past performance also cannot be consideration as there is no exchange. Consideration is nothing but a valid consideration needs to be significant, adequate, unconditional. To be valid, consideration must be real, and it is in the one sense it should not be impractical, legal, impossible. Consideration must be moved at the desire of the promisor only, and nobody will be taking. So consideration should always have an originate from new obligations, as consideration from pre-existing duty is not enforceable. An agreement without consideration is absolutely void, but there are certain exceptions incorporated under Section 25, such as promise arising out of natural love and affection, past voluntary services, promise to pay time-paid debt, etc., under which an agreement without consideration is valid. Essentials, if you want to see, the Indian Contract Act 1872 gives that giving at the desire of the promisor, given by the promise or any other person, or it may be a past, present, or the future consideration. It must be real, certain, and lawful, and it may be positive or the negative, and it need to be adequate. This is a famous case what you can see, that is on 1879 Durga Prasad versus Ballantyre, and here the particular few shops of his own expenses has been ordered for the collector. The people who just took their occupation of the shops promised to pay commission for the particular sales, Durga Prasad, but he did not perform on the promise. Durga Prasad showed the shopkeepers, and Allahabad High Court, the consideration has said that it is invalid since he had built the shops on the order of a collector and not the instant of the shopkeepers. Like that, we also have a Kedarnath Bhattacharya versus Muhammad 1886 case. An adequacy of the particular consideration comes under the particular value of some value. And it is important to note that it is not, however, necessary for the consideration should be adequate to the promise, and the courts cannot assume the duty to determine what would be an appropriate consideration for the parties. The parties have to decide that between the particular parties also. The adequacy of the consideration is something which is for the parties to decide when entering the particular contract, not for the court when it has been sought to be enforced. Consideration must be real, and physically or legally impossible things cannot be taken as a nature. The consideration will also not to be considered real if it comes under the level of uncertainty, because if consideration is not certain, it becomes impossible to carry out. Give under the instance when the consideration will become unreal and hence the void in the eyes of law. Exceptions, you can say, no consideration, no contract. So agreement made on account of a natural love and affection, compensation for the past voluntary services, promise to pay time-bound debt, complete gifts, agency, gracious bail means guarantee and the remission, that comes under Section 63 of Indian Contract Act. And the privity of contract is another, we have to look after that. As a general rule, when a person who is a party to a contract, enforceable rights or an obligation, the common law for this particular privity of contract stands for a person cannot be bound or take advantage of a contract to which he is not a party. Dunlop versus Selfridge 1915 case is an example. The claimant could not recover damages under a contract to which it is not a party. Executory and executor considerations, if you want to see. Executory consideration has yet to be performed. Traditionally, it is an act or promise not yet carried out. Once a promise or an act has been performed, the consideration is said to be executed. A contract can be partly executed and partly executory. Example, one party has completed their other side for the bargain. Finally, I would like to say consideration is the price of a promise made by the other party. Something such an act absence or promise to do abstain from doing anything something at the request of the promiser by the promisee or any other parties or any persons constituting consideration for the promise. A valid consideration needs to be significant, adequate, and conditional to be valid. It has given a promise or any third party, whereas under English law, the type of consideration are past, present, and the future. The law does not recognize consideration for charitable purposes and it is unenforceable in the eyes of law. Consideration should always originate from new obligation, as consideration from the pre-existing duty is not enforceable. An agreement without consideration is void, but there are certain exceptions incorporated under section 25, such as promise arising out of nature and love and affection, past voluntary services, promise to pay time-bound debt, etc., which an agreement without consideration is valid. Thank you.